All right, we
All
should be
right.
live.
All right. I will pub the link. Let me go to YouTube. Probably push people to YouTube, right? Everybody to YouTube?
Yeah, whatever's fine. YouTube or Facebook is probably
Oh, yeah,
best.
there we go. You can
Although they
see
can comment in on Twitter now, I believe.
Okay. I tweeted the link. So we'll see what kind of numbers we do here. All right. Ready to go?
Hold on one sec. I'm sending the tweet
Okay.
out now.
You're good. All right.
All right, whenever you want, Paul.
All right. Welcome into another episode of the Musketeer Report podcast. Paul Fritschner and Rick Broering with you, and it's great to be here on a what is this? A Tuesday? What day is this? Let's restart.
It's Monday. Paul.
Let's
Monday,
restart.
Paul.
Welcome into the Musketeer Report podcast. Paul Fritschner and Rick Broering with you. Today is Monday, February 5th, 2024. Xavier right now coming off a pretty interesting week, at least since the last time we talked to you on the Musketeer Report podcast. It was a 43-point loss at UConn. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time in this show on that game. Then it was an 88-77 bounce back win over St. John's at home 72 hours later after that UConn loss. And then over the weekend, a 93-68 win at DePaul, in which Quincy Oliveri scores 43 points. It's the first time a Xavier player has scored at least 40 points since Trayvon Blewett back in January of 2017 against Cincinnati. It's also, Shelby Dermer pointed out from the Enquirer, the first time a Sean Miller coached player has ever scored 40 in a game, which is kind of hard to believe given all the names that have come through and played for Sean. It's the first time Sean's ever coached a player in college that has scored 40. So some news and things to talk about from the week. Rick, a big week upcoming here, coming back home to play Villanova and Creighton. They're all important at this point in the season, right? They're all big going down the stretch into February, but this week just feels like it has a little bit more to it because by this time next week, by the time we're podcasting next Monday, it feels like we're going to know a whole lot more about where this team stands, what their bubble chances are. Right now, Xavier sits at about a 60% chance to make the tournament, a little over 54% as an at-large bid, and then they're giving them a 5.6% chance or whatever it is to get the automatic bid to win the Big East tournament. So Xavier's more likely than not right now to make the NCAA tournament, but still a lot more work to do. Rick, your overall impression since the last time we podcasted, because it has been a roller coaster of an 8 or 9 day period.
Well, let's rehash. Everyone wants to talk bracketology, so let's go off the jump point where you started there. Bracket Matrix has Xavier 12 spots away from the cut line. They're ranked 37th in KenPom, 47th in the net. They're sitting at 12-10 overall, tied for 5th in the Big East standings with Butler at 6-5 right now. So I think, the question on everyone's mind, from what I can tell, is what does Xavier need to do to make the dance as an at-large? And I think the thing that I keep going back to is they need to win 18 games to be in the conversation legitimately. If they get to 17, their name will be thrown around. They'll be near the cut line, I think, but you're not going to feel good about their chances. If they get to 18, I think you will feel good about their chances, because that will mean at least, I think, 2 more quad 1 wins. We'll get into that in a second. But you're also looking at, 6 more wins, I believe. Yeah, they're sitting 12-10 overall. Yeah, so 6 more wins. That's where I think they need to get to feel good about their at-large chances. We can pull up the bracketologist website here that'll show the quad 1s versus quad 2 games.
There's 5 quad 1. Yeah, there's 5 quad 1 games left. 2 of them are at home, Creighton and then Marquette to end the season. And then the 3 away games are Seton Hall, at Marquette, and at Butler. Feels to me the Seton Hall game, obviously winnable. Xavier gave Seton Hall the business when they came to Cintas Center. And then the at Hinkle game, it's always a toss-up, but that feels like it might not be a bad matchup for Xavier either. That game at Marquette, probably the toughest game left on the schedule for the Musketeers. That would be the one I would say I have a hard time seeing Xavier win that game at Marquette. But also, Marquette's not terrible matchup for Xavier. It's not the best matchup. They're not terrible. We also, like you pointed out on the board, just haven't seen them play each other yet this year.
Yeah, so I think the reason that this week is so big for Xavier is because if you're talking about needing to stack wins down the stretch here, and it's not an easy stretch, there's no easy stretches in the Big East, but you've played your hardest games already. So this is a stretch where you feel like you could, some of these games are very much winnable. And looking at the two games upcoming, you've got a quad 2 game at home against Villanova, and then that quad 1 game at home against Creighton. Though that quad 1 game against Creighton, I believe, is Xavier's best chance left for a quad 1 win, being at home and against a team that you've proven you already match up fairly well against. I think that's why this week is so big for Xavier, because if you're going to stack these wins like we've talked about, and you're going to get a quad 1 win here, this feels very much like a chance to get on the right track and start winning some games here.
I'm not saying Xavier is going to go 9-0 to finish the season, but I don't see a game on this schedule outside of maybe at Marquette where I say, oh, yeah, that's a loss. They don't have UConn left.
I think that's fair. And I've talked about it a lot of times how, when a team is 1 game over 500, or now they're 2 games over 500, and it feels like they're fighting to keep their head above water, it gets hard to talk a lot about their NCAA tournament resume. But it is worth noting that, they have played a lot of difficult Big East games already through the first half of the conference slate here. And you look at the back half, again, not easy, but like you said, the game at Marquette is really the only one that you look at and you say, I feel like they don't have a great chance there. The rest of the games feel winnable. So, I guess the other question as it relates to bracketology before we move on, Paul, is how many Big East teams do you think are actually going to make it in to the dance?
Yeah, that was one thing I was looking at a little bit earlier. I would say probably 6 is the number. You say UConn, Marquette, Creighton, and then from there you have your pick of the next 3, whether that's Seton Hall. Butler seems to be on the right side of the cut line. Villanova is trending in the wrong direction, albeit they did win yesterday. The St. John's squeak in. Xavier, one of those. I think at the end of the day, Providence is totally going south. They're headed very much in the wrong direction without Bryce Hopkins. So I think a lot of people are talking about 7 teams from the league getting in. I think 7 to 8 teams are in the conversation right now. I don't think that'll end up being the final number. You can see Providence right there. Rick has, if you're listening in audio form, you can go to YouTube. Rick has Bracket Matrix pulled up right now, which is the best bracketology pool there is. It kind of pulls together all of the bracketologists into one place. Providence right there on the cut line at 12. Seton Hall's in there at 11. So you can see Butler, Villanova down there in the conversation. Xavier has a vote. So it's like all these teams are right there on the cusp. It's not like we're talking about 5 top-end teams that are going to get protected seeds. We're talking about a lot of teams that are very bubbly outside of the top 3 of Creighton, Marquette, and UConn. How many do you think get in?
Yeah, I'm looking at
St. John's will get in. St. John's will get in.
I think they will, but they're still on the bubble too. I mean,
yeah, they are.
If they lose 2 games over the course of the next week or whatever, they're right in the same boat as everybody else here, and maybe even in a worse spot. So, yeah, St. John, Seton Hall, Providence, Butler, Villanova, Xavier, 6 teams right there, all right around that bubble cut line. I think at least 2 of those are getting in. So you're looking at 5 teams. Decent chance that 3 will get in, and the Big East will have 6 dancing.
I would say 6. I'd say a lot of people talk about what the bracket looks like right now versus what they might predict the bracket looks like 6 weeks from now. I'll say prediction-wise, even though that's not where it stands right now, I'll say prediction-wise that the Big East ends up getting 6 in, and maybe 2 teams go to Dayton. I don't think that's totally out of the question that 2 teams end up in the first 4 in or last.
Okay, so let me throw, when you just threw that name out there, it made me think of this. I got a text from one of our mutual friends before we went on this podcast.
I think I got the exact same text.
Okay, so you know where I'm going with this. How would Xavier Nation feel about a Xavier sneaking in as a 12 seed playing against 5 seed Dayton in the first round of this year's NCAA tournament?
Well, that mutual friend that sent us that text also pointed out that Dayton would be a nightmare of a matchup for Xavier. I mean, Deron Holmes and everything else that Dayton team has. I'm not saying Xavier wouldn't win that game because I do think that I've watched a lot of Dayton this year. I think they're a very fun team to watch. I think Deron Holmes is a really fun player to watch. I saw a pretty prominent Dayton fan today asking whether Deron Holmes is the best player to ever play at Dayton. And I'm not learned enough on Dayton history to know that. And I don't want this to turn into a Dayton podcast. But I think Deron Holmes is very much in the conversation, at least. I think he's probably a more impactful player for this team, as wild as this is to say, than Obi Toppin. Because if Deron Holmes got hurt, they would be way worse off than that Obi Toppin team. And Obi was very, very good, but that team had a lot of other massive pieces. They were a great team all the way
number
around.
One team in the country.
Yeah. So that team was not just Obi Toppin. This team isn't just Deron Holmes, but if Deron Holmes got out, I mean, if he was injured, this would not be a protected seed team like they're fighting for right now. They scrap and
there are tens and tens of Xavier fans listening to this live right now. So if you guys want to chime in with your thoughts on this, I'm actually curious to know, would Xavier fans want that chance to ruin Dayton's year? And another, because you go back to the COVID year when they were ranked number 1 and they missed out on that opportunity. I think a lot of Dayton fans are feeling that this is their sort of vengeance for that. This is their chance. And maybe this will be the year that they make the run to make up for that COVID year. Would you like the chance to spoil that? Or do you just want to avoid the Dayton thing altogether this year when Xavier's not at its best?
I think it would be very funny if Xavier played, let's just say Xavier's an 11 seed or a 12 seed. Say Xavier's a 12 seed, gets sent to Dayton. All the Dayton fans pack the arena. They're cheering against Xavier, but in the back of their mind, as our mutual friend pointed out, everybody in the back of their mind is knowing Xavier's on the other end, potentially playing them in the first. I'll be honest, I wouldn't want to deal with it. I wouldn't want to. Maybe I'm in the minority. I'm seeing you put a lot of I guess I'm unanimously in the minority. I wouldn't want to deal with it. I also just have watched enough Dayton this year to know that they wouldn't be a great matchup for Xavier. I wouldn't want to deal with the Flyers. They're really good.
It would just be so nerve-wracking, I think, from a fan experience of like the last time you guys met was the perfect ending to that rivalry. The 30-point win for the Advocare Invitational Championship on a neutral floor. Do you want to open up the can of worms again and give them that opportunity to get the win in an NCAA tournament game and have the bigger win to end it again? So all the comments here so far, we've got Bring On UD from Ryan. Melissa says, who wouldn't want to ruin Dayton's year? Paula says, of course we would. Crosstown Miller says, why not? So, I mean, all the comments are saying that, they'd love the opportunities. I just thought that was an interesting point. I hadn't even thought of that yet. And it's probably a very remote chance, but we know how the committee likes to say that they don't think about these storylines when they're putting together the bracket.
Give me a break. They absolutely do.
They 1000% do.
Yeah, give me a break. They absolutely do. I mean, the thought of, I think that's what I keep coming back to with the Dayton rivalry is that if and when they join a power conference again, then you fire that up or join a power conference at all. But the fact that the final score is what it is from that Advocare game, and that's the lasting memory of that rivalry, I'm perfectly now. If you win that game and you knock Dayton out of the NCAA tournament, then I'd play that game 10 times out of 10. But the nerve-wracking thought of Dayton then beating you and knocking you out, I'm good. I'm good with that.
All right,
let's move on.
Yeah, let's switch gears here because I want to start this off by asking you a question. Quincy Oliveri with the 43-point game at DePaul, career high for him. You mentioned it was the most a Xavier player had scored since 2017 when, or the first 40-point game since when Blewett did it with 40 against UC in the Crosstown shootout in 2017, and the most since David West scored his 45 against Dayton. Let's repeat the stat line. 43 points on 12 of 20 shooting. He was 7 of 12 from three-point range, which tied his career high for three-pointers. 12 of 12 at the free throw line. 10 rebounds for the double-double. Also had 3 assists, 3 steals, 0 turnovers in 36 minutes of action. So, Paul, I'll ask you this because you're a little bit younger. Your frame of reference, the Xavier performances that you've seen are going to be fewer. Where does that stack up in terms of the best all-time Xavier performances that you've seen?
Just of ones that I've seen, I mean, Trayvon's is really the one that comes to mind, because what sticks out about Trayvon whenever I think back to that game, and I know it was in a loss, is just how big the basket felt. And that was what Quincy kept telling us after the game, is it just felt like I couldn't miss. And that was exactly what Trayvon was talking about back from that 2017 shootout. Was everything was going in. You think about that shot that Trayvon hit right before halftime in that game, where he just threw the ball up before the buzzer. It was like counting down toward the halftime, and it goes in. Those are the kinds of games you think of where, as a shooter, you just feel so confident. You're stepping into your shot. You feel like it's going to go in no matter, hand in your face, wide open. It doesn't matter. That was the way Quincy Oliveri felt the other night. I can't think of another game like that where 2 shots into the game, I'm sitting there with Shelby and with Adam, and I'm thinking to myself, this could be a special night. Now, did I think he was going to go for 43? No. But playing against DePaul, where Xavier felt clearly confident on the offensive end, and he's actively searching for his shot, being very aggressive. We talked the last time on this podcast about Quincy's struggles on the is that Lazar's dad checking in?
You tell me. I assume
I think it has to be
here.
Love it. Mr. Djokovic checking in from Serbia. I don't know. I can't read that. That's not English, but I appreciate
Rick and Paul is in there. I do see Rick and Paul, so thank you for checking in. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I can't think of another one that I have seen. Obviously, you go back to David West. I thought it was funny. Jeremy Rouse saw Steve Thomas. I don't know if you saw that quote that Jeremy tweeted out. Jeremy ran into Steve Thomas on Sunday and was asking Steve. They were kind of joking back and forth about what Steve was thinking watching that game on Saturday night. Steve has the all-time record of 50, but just on games that I've seen, Rick, is there something that I'm missing since 2009 that really rivals what Quincy
did you watch the David West performance? Like, do you remember that from when it happened, or did you watch it back?
No. Yeah. I've watched it since, but not live.
Yeah, I just think it's different. Like, when you're in the moment and you have the full context of like how it felt and what the fans were saying and how the teams were at that time, it's just different. It's hard to go back and compare something that you didn't experience live. And I'm not saying you had to be there at the game, but just, watching it and understanding the context and all of that. For me, I think this is going to sound crazy. Like, the David West is the best performance, definitely, and it's that UD Xavier rivalry, but the Trayvon Blewett one is just hard for me to, I know it was a loss, but to do that in the crosstown shootout, and so much of it was in that first half of that game, the way he was going in that first half, like, I don't think I've ever felt a player was dominating a game more than Trayvon did in the first half of that crosstown shootout. So I would probably still lean that, although I saw the David West thing. I remember it well, like, fully on board with that. I'm willing to give you the heads up or the nod on that being the best of all time. But that Trayvon Blewett one, for whatever reason, just seems, maybe it's because of the shootout, and I hold the shootout in such high regard that that one still sticks out to me as like the best performance or the most impressive performance that I saw.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so memorable. You think back to these crazy games. I can't think of one that would be even anywhere close to what Trayvon did in that. And then Quincy goes for 43. He's the Big East Player of the Week. So shout out to everybody that's listening right now. I see Shu checking in from Asia at 2 a.m. over there.
Paul,
appreciate it. Yeah, go ahead.
How does Quincy's season here, where we're at, I mean, he's been so good. How does this compare to the expectations we had for Quincy coming into the year?
Well,
like,
shooting
wise, the reality of Quincy better than what we thought he would be? Because in my opinion, I think he is.
Yeah, I do, because we expected him to be a shooter, but to translate to this level, I mean, you think about these guys that have transferred up, right? Mid-major guys that transfer up to the high major level, and maybe their role has changed. Maybe none bigger than what we've talked about a lot with Davion McKnight, where you're the guy, you're scoring a lot, but then you come up, now you got to run the show, you still get your mid-range shot, all those things. But it took him a while to adjust and figure out what Sean Miller was exactly asking him to do. Now you have Rice's all-time leading three-point shooter who can go in, he can fire away. He'd scored 30 multiple times at Rice, but he is doing this night in and night out. It's not like he's putting up 20, then he'll put up 8 or 10. I mean, he is the Big East's leading scorer. He is one of the best shooters in the entire country. I can't imagine, and somebody pointed this out on your message board, I can't imagine what this team would be like without him. Think about the scoring woes of what Xavier would look like if Quincy Oliveri was not scoring almost 20 points per game. And he's doing it so efficiently most nights. He's getting to the foul line. He was 12 for 12 from the free throw line on Saturday night. It's not like he's just going out there chucking up threes and hoping they go in. Some nights he's hot, some nights he's not. He's getting to the free throw line. He's being aggressive. I think sometimes you live with some of the shots that he'll take when he's maybe a little too aggressive getting to the rim. Those are some of the things you just have to live with. But he's defended at a high level. He's had these games against such high levels of competition that, to me, he has far surpassed what I was expecting out of him, even just as a pure shooter coming into the year.
I would agree with that. And I think the biggest thing when I look at it is I watched every game he played at Rice. I watched every possession he played at Rice, not just last year, but all the years. After he committed through the transfer portal, I went, did a deep dive, watched every single possession on Synergy that he played at Rice. He's better now. Playing against Big East competition, playing at Xavier with better players around him, he is a better player here than he was at Rice. And that's the part that really impresses me, Paul. I think the combination, and this isn't to take a shot at his coaching staff at Rice, because he clearly has a great relationship with the head coach from Rice. And and so, like, this is not a shot at him at all. But I think Sean Miller and the staff at Xavier have gotten him to do things that he's never done before, and it's taken his game to another level. I think even just the strength and conditioning work that he's done since he's been at Xavier, gotten his body into elite shape to where he can sprint the length of the floor and get those points in transition, because that's unlocked another part of his game. Being able to sprint ahead and get easy baskets, whether it mean not necessarily even baskets, but getting easy points by getting a cheap foul. How many times has he done that? Just ahead, just thrown his body into a defender, gotten to the free throw line, and then made a pair of free throws. That was something that he wasn't doing a lot of at Rice. He was getting to the free throw line, but they were hard-earned trips to the free throw line. He was having to play off the dribble and get into guys' bodies in the half court and all of that. Now, all the running and all the playing in transition that Xavier does on offense, that has really unlocked another part of his game. And that would also lead into what a few other people have brought up here in the comments. Defensively, he's much better than I expected him to be. Watching him at Rice and even seeing him initially when he got to Xavier, I was thinking defense is going to be a weakness of his. And it's turned out that he's really maybe Xavier's most consistent defender. Now, he's not the most talented defender. He's not as quick as like a Quincy Oliveri is, or maybe even a Davion McKnight. But in terms of just adhering to the scouting report and giving a consistent, honest effort, he is probably the best on the team right now at that.
Yeah. And I did think it was very funny, Sean joking after the game. I guess we should clarify.
I knew we need to address this.
So I knew what I was doing when I tweeted this out. I did not anticipate so many people taking it seriously on Twitter. So I guess I should apologize for that a little bit. But Sean was very funny in the post game where it was hard to hear. I tried to amplify the sound, but when we were asking the questions, we didn't get a microphone in Chicago. You actually posted the full press conference on the Musketeer report page. So if you want to go back and listen to it, you can, but it's really hard to hear. Adam asks a great question where he says, you know, you had Sule Boom last year, Sean. Now you have Quincy Oliveri this year, where these are both guys that you only were able to coach for 1 year. Xavier fans enjoy these guys for 1 year. What is it like for you to know that you get such a special talent, but you're only able to coach them for 1 year? And Sean's response was very funny, very Sean of, well, who's to say we only have them for 1 year? Has anybody checked in on that? There's never a hard no. And that was very tongue-in-cheek. It was very funny. He got off the camera cut, and he got off the stage, and Greg Christopher was standing right to my right. Tom Iser was sitting right in front of me. So he was looking over at Greg. He was looking at Tom. He knew exactly what he was saying and what he was doing. I do think a couple of people make a point on Twitter where eventually in today's landscape, somebody is going to sue the NCAA for eligibility beyond 4 years in the NIL era. At some point that will happen. But in this particular case, no. Quincy has not used a red shirt. He can't red shirt because obviously he's played. This is his COVID year. He can't come back next year. That's it. End of story. but it was still a very Sean Miller moment in the post game to say there is never a hard no.
Just Sean having fun. I was a little surprised. I didn't realize people were actually asking the question. Like I saw these comments last night and I thought people were just having fun on social media. And then the questions continued into this morning and they're like on the message board and stuff. So I was like, oh, like people are actually thinking this is a possibility. So yeah, we should probably address it that Quincy Oliveri has definitely exhausted his eligibility after this year. And quite honestly, after the year he's having, I'm sure he's going to try to parlay this into whatever professional success he can have, whether that's in the NBA or overseas. I mean, he's having a great year and really showcasing his abilities on both ends of the floor. So I guess the final thing I would say about Quincy, Paul, is this. We talked about the expectations for him as a player. And when he committed, we've read the stories. We saw the pieces the local news stations had done, near Rice, where they were talking about his personality and what a big smile and big personality he has. And so we know, okay, this guy's going to be fun to be here for a year. But he has gone way above and beyond the typical student-athlete relationship with the fans and what you would expect out of a charismatic guy who has a good press conference. I mean, the stuff he's been doing with the Chick-fil-A and the going to the little Catholic school lunch day with the kids and signing autographs after games and doing all these things, reaching out, having his mom send signed posters to all these people for Christmas. I mean, all of this stuff is just, he's really endeared himself to this fan base. And there's been a lot of special, classy individuals that have come through Xavier and played basketball at Xavier. But even in just his short time here, Quincy is going to end up ranking among the top of those.
Yeah, and I just got to give a shout out to him because it's very genuine. And I think a lot of people wonder about that. Is he doing this for the camera? Is he doing this just because the camera's on him and he's playing well? And, is this actually who he is?
Even if he is, Paul, at this point, he's put like 40 hours of off the court time into like these endeavor. Like he's doing like a part-time job with all the stuff he's doing.
Yeah. And he's very genuine about it. He's an extremely nice guy. He always makes time for us, whether it's an interview or whether it's after practice, and he comes up and talks to us and just, enjoys his time around the program. He's always laughing with everybody. He gets along with everybody. I think, Schuminger asked, does Q do all these things that they need to be approved by the team, the school, and the coach? I think the one thing that I have heard is not so much that they have to be approved, but more so make sure you don't stretch yourself too thin on the you are playing basketball.
Yeah. It can't be like St. Mary's lunch at 3 p.m. today. We've got practice. The after school program will have to wait.
Yeah, but as long as it's stuff that he can do in his free time and it doesn't interfere with what he's doing on the court, he's allowed to do all those things. I'm sure, if there was something with compliance, like they would step in, but nothing that he is doing in any way interferes with anything that is going on with the team. He's very genuine. He's nice. He's great for the community. And so it's fun to see him doing this, and it's an opportunity over the next month that, if he's a guy that gets to play in the NCAA tournament because Xavier wins 6 of their last 9 games or 7 of their last 9 games and puts himself in a position to get into the NCAA tournament, it's going to be due in large part to his play. I know he had that heat check 3, which was laugh out loud funny when he pulls up from 10 feet beyond the arc and Sean Miller, which I got to give a shout out to DePaul because where their media seating is, you're right next to the bench. So we're right there. It is unbelievable on the baseline, being able to hear Sean and hear everything he's saying. And that heat check 3 that Quincy took, and then immediately, that ball was barely off the rim, and Sean was, all right, let's go. Even though he had scored like 16 of the last 18 points or whatever.
That's the key. The context is the key. He had literally dominated the game in an absurd fashion over the last 3 minutes where he had scored 16 of 18 points for Xavier. And Sean's like, heat check, get out of there. Don't take effed up shots. Not playing
I don't think that ball was an inch off the rim when my eyes went over to Sean and I saw him doing one of these.
I was laughing out loud watching that as well. That was a classic Sean Miller moment right there.
It was.
Never stops coaching.
Yeah. All right. So that's Quincy Oliveri. Let's move on to Lazar Djokovic. Had 13 minutes against DePaul. He did not play against St. John's. Hit a 3 against DePaul. I think a lot of fans We've talked a lot about the expectations for Lazar coming into the season. He's had to navigate playing here on this team, trying to find a role. Maybe this is a little bit of a spark for him.
The thing that stands out to me, Paul, is the staff keeps giving him chances. They keep putting him out there. They keep giving him more opportunities. And we had talked, Kashi Enze got those mop-up duty minutes against UConn, and Sean gave him a lot of praise after that game, saying he came in and he did what he was supposed to in the time that he got. And we thought, well, he maybe start seeing some of these extra front court minutes that Lazar has been getting. And lo and behold, in this DePaul game, they go right back to Lazar. He gets some minutes in the first half there. And the biggest thing to me was he got to see that first shot go through the hoop. He's in there for 10 seconds. He gets a wide open three on the right wing. He knocks it down. And he just hasn't had that chance much this year. He's a guy who's skilled. He's used to shooting and scoring. And he's had to learn to do all the other things without seeing the ball go through the hoop. And I think that's been a challenge for him, because you saw that ball went in and then he played 13 of the best minutes that he's played all season long. And I think the thing that's really going to earn him some favor with the coaches is the way he played defensively. Xavier was having a really hard time defending inside without fouling in this game. And he comes in and they always talk about verticality, right? Being able to go straight up without reaching down or fouling shooters, just being able to contest while staying in your space and going straight up and using your length. He did a great job of that. He was going up, contesting around the rim, making it tough on them to finish, but not fouling. Now, granted, it's DePaul, and that probably helped him as much as anything, but he hasn't done that in other games. And in other games that Xavier had leads and the opponent wasn't as good, he hasn't been able to do those things. So I just thought that the defensive prowess he showed, which has probably been his biggest issue, defense and rebounding, and the reason he's struggled to get on the court as much, he was solid in that regard. And that's really what the coaching staff is looking for from him right now.
Yeah, and now the question is, can he continue to fill that role down the stretch? Is this an opportunity for him that over these last 9 games, can you go out there? Can you give that same kind of production, especially in some of these games where you're seeing bigger bodies on the floor, some of these guys that he's going to have to match up with if he is in the game? It's just building confidence. It's just instilling in him that this is the Big East. You got to be physical. You got to go up into a player. He's when you see him hitting a lot of these, like in practice, if it's a fadeaway instead of going up into a player, it's just embracing that physicality. And once he does that, because that's what this coaching staff preaches, Sean Miller wants nothing more than somebody who's not going to back down, somebody who's going to be tough, somebody who's going to go up into a player, body them, be physical, get rebounds, go to the foul line, all those things. He's a talented shooter. He has maybe one of the best forms on the team as far as shooting goes, if stepping into a shot. So once he embraces that physicality and can really step into that role, I think that's when you see it expand. Now, was this lightning in a bottle on Saturday, or was this a tale of something more? We'll see here over the next week.
Well, one thing I would point out is Adam Cohen did Sean Miller's post-game interview on the radio with Joe and Steve Wolf after this game. And he brought up the fact that Lazar has been practicing really well. And I know that sometimes can kind of be a throwaway line that coaches will use. But in this case, with a guy like Lazar, who's, they didn't even play him at all in their last game. And then he comes back out and he gets 13 minutes in this one. Like, I don't think they're BSing about that. I think they're being pretty straightforward about what he needs to do and why he's not playing or why he is. And I think for Adam to say, he's been practicing well recently, it just hasn't translated to games yet, was part of the reason why they continue to give him more chances. And I think to your question about will he be able to give them a lift down the stretch here, I don't think it'll be a lift in the sense that like he's going to start being a third or fourth scoring option for them and have 10 or 15 point games. But is it crazy to think that Abu Usman might get in foul trouble early in an important game down the stretch? I don't think that's crazy at all. I think that's probably likely. And the idea that he might be able to step in for 5 key minutes and play solid defense for you, that's where he could really give them a lift, I think.
I wasn't going to bring up practice only because we're privileged to be able to go to practice, and I don't like to talk about a whole lot of those things because it is closed except to us. So, but since you mentioned it with Adam, Adam's opinion obviously greatly outweighs what I'm about to say, but if you would ask me, Paul, how does Lazar practice? I would say because a lot of people ask about this on the board. They say, well, he's getting minutes because he must be practicing well. He has been lately, especially. And in the beginning, I think a lot of it was trying to learn the system. I think Sean would get frustrated sometimes where maybe he's out of position or he's not in the system. He's not doing what he needs to be doing. And lately, you've seen him do that. You've seen him hit shots more in practice. And those are the kinds of things where it's going to speak to your ability to then go out and do that in a game.
I think the other thing that some people this may help some fans, is a lot of people have brought up the idea of like, how could the expectations for him be so high before the season? Like, obviously the coaching staff was talking about he would have been starting had he not been injured for the first game. We know where the national guys like Rothstein and Fanta and Goodman got their information from, that he was looking so good. We know they heard comments from the coaching staff along those lines to be saying things like that. So how did we get from that point to where we've been for most of the season with Lazar, where he's not playing as many minutes and he's not very productive? I think one thing you might be able to point to is Xavier's front court was pretty bad defensively, especially early this season. So when he came in right away and he was looking pretty good, part of that was, well, he's probably playing without thinking before he really knew the system, and he's playing free and a little more confident. And as things have gotten tougher, he's lost some confidence. But part of it was also he was scoring against guys who weren't great Big East defenders. And when he got up against really talented big men in real game action, it was even harder than it was in practice against his own teammates. So I think that might be part of it too, is maybe we didn't know at the time, but his early success this year when he first got to campus might have told us a little bit about the issues Xavier was going to have defending opposing front courts.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. That's a great point. All right, let's move on now. Let's talk about, we're already on the front court. Who do you currently, would you say, Rick, have confidence in for the front court rotation next year? Because again, just to clarify, Quincy Oliveri is the only player that as of February 5th, we know will not be on this team next year. I'm sure there will be transfers. I'm sure there will be turnover, but as of right now, he's the only player that we know for sure can't be on there. His eligibility is expired. What do you think about next year's for a minute?
Yeah, so this comes from a conversation that it's been going on the musketeerreport.com message board, which, by the way, if you're watching this, listening to this right now on Monday, we have a flash sale going on right now, 75% off. You can get an annual VIP subscription for 75% off. It's like $2.24 per month, less than pretty much anything you can buy at a fast food or a gas station these days. Cheaper than your coffee, cheaper than your fountain drinks. Just sign up. You'll check it multiple times every single day. Promise you won't regret it. But the conversation that's been going on the message board has been about the future of the front court and how this rotation looks. And obviously Lazar, who we're talking about now, plays a big role in that conversation. But part of the reason this is so difficult to figure out, and it's been such a big conversation on the message board, is there's a lot of unknowns because of Jerome Hunter and Zach Freemantle. Not unknown what the plan is. We know that they are expected to come back next year, and Xavier is counting on having them in the rotation. But you'd also be completely naive or just dumb to think that that's 100% foolproof and there's no issues with the possibility of Jerome Hunter and Zach Freemantle returning to full game action, right? I mean, like, Jerome is coming off major heart issues and things that aren't exactly clear. They've cleared him every step of the way. He's returned to practice now, but who's to say that something else won't come up down the line? Obviously, everyone is hoping for the best, but I don't think you can 100% say everything's going to be great there. And then also with Zach, you're on your third foot surgery. So same boat. You can't just automatically assume everything's going to be great there. But at the same time, you have these guys, you know they are good Big East players. You'd love to have them starting for you next year. And so you're going to take that chance and assume that they will be the starters, I think, going into next year. And that's how I would see it. I would see Zach Freemantle at the 5 and Jerome Hunter at the 4 as your starters. I know some people look at that and say, well, is Zach really a starting center in the Big East? I thought he had some defensive issues there when we tried that before. That's the case, but I'm just telling you right now, if your roster is exactly the same, if he was available right now this year, Zach Freemantle would be starting at the center spot. He would clearly be the best center on this team. So I feel pretty good about saying going into next year, he would be my starting 5. Jerome would be my starting 4. And then from there, Paul, I mean, it gets really interesting because you still have Gitas for another year. You still have Abu for another year. And then obviously you have all of the freshmen in theory. Kachi, Lazar, Sasha. All of those guys can come back, and that's behind Jerome and Zach in theory. So, I mean, the conversation about will all of these guys be back next year? Will the staff look to even add more front court player? That's a very legitimate question, and it's one without an easy or obvious answer, even for the staff right now. Like, I think they have a plan, but I don't think they 100% know how this thing is going to go or exactly what they want to do just yet.
No, and I think the other point that I would make with this, because I think you just hit on a lot of what I was going to say, is that there's going to be a lot of turnover in the Big East next year as far as star power goes. You think a lot of these names that probably aren't going to be back next year in the Big East. Now, some of these could be names that may be able to use another year. I think Tyler Kolek's going to be gone next year. I don't know if he can come back for another year, what his COVID deal was. His freshman year was 2020, 2021. So he might be able to come back one more year. But you think like guys like Eric Dixon, Justin Moore, Tristan Newton, Baylor Shireman, all these bigger names. Joel Soriano. I think Soriano's gone. I think this was his last year. It is his last year. So you think of a lot of big names around the Big East and what Xavier might be able to do. And I'm just talking about Xavier's positioning in the conference next year, assuming this roster matures as we think it will. I don't want to stir the pot on February 5th where we're still doing bracketology for the 2024 season. But next year has a chance to really be something for Xavier in the Big East, I think.
Well, maybe, but I mean, the front court situation has to be figured out. And I guess the big question is, would you be going to get another big man in the transfer portal? I think that's where the question comes in and what people are mostly debating, because some people are saying like, hey, we've got this logjam already, all the names we just listed that are coming back for next year. And yet I think some people would still say you could use an upgrade at the center position, especially. And I would agree with that. Like, I would be very much of the opinion that, and I would assume the coaching staff is feeling this way, that we are going to go look for another starting center in the transfer portal and try to upgrade if we can. But at the same time, if you weren't able to do that, I don't think you would feel terrible about the idea of starting Zach Freemantle with Abu Usman backing him up next year.
I agree. And I think the experience that Abu has gotten this year, I've said this many times on the show, that he was recruited to play behind these guys, and now he's gained experience as the starter. So I think that'll play a very important role. It'll be valuable for next year. But one thing I was talking about with some of my friends last night is I really miss the Tyreek Jones effect. I really miss that big bruising forward, that big bruising front court player where you look at guys like, Donovan Clingan or a Zach Edey, and those guys. That's not to say that you can just find those guys anywhere, but that for as much as basketball has gone away from the true five, the true center, the post up, back to the basket type of player, it seems like the guys that are able to do that have been having a lot of success as far as the teams go. And part of that is because they are such unicorns. I understand, but there's a part of me that really misses that just shove it down your throat, bruiser, big, power forward center.
Well, it's back in the college game, Paul. It's not going anywhere. There's a real resurgence in the post game in college basketball. And the reason for that is the NBA has completely gone away from it. So they find those guys to be useless. The 6'8" to 6'10" bruisers that can score with their back to the baskets are pretty much useless in the NBA. But now we have NIL in college. So if you can dominate the low post, you're willing to come back and earn another $150K the following year instead of taking your chances overseas or getting your tryout in the NBA only to find out you're going to get cut in summer league and never be heard from again. Those guys are now staying in college an extra few. I mean, look at Armando Bacot. He was supposed to be a one and done guy, and he's going to be like a 17-year starter at North Carolina now and never win anything at constant. So like, I think this is going to be a real thing going forward, is that you're going to continue to see big men dominate college basketball, and you're going to continue to see teams rely on having multiple big men and playing through the post a bit more, because you're going to have the most talent at those positions in college basketball. The overwhelming talented players that don't necessarily work in the NBA but dominate college will stick around college longer now. And so I think that's a real thing. And as it relates to Xavier, you can't bring all these guys back. I think one of the freshman big men are probably not going to be back next year, at least, maybe multiple. But it would not surprise me at all if they did look to bring in an upgrade at the center position.
I mean, you think about Arizona, right? And Max points it out in the chat. You think about these guys that some of Sean's guys, DeAndre Ayton, Umar Ballo, who's there right now. And I know a lot of Arizona fans are writing off Ballo, but he had a great game last night against Stanford. Azuolas Tubelis, some of these names that are big guys in the front court that can go out there and score for you, but they can mix it up. Give me one of those guys, Rick. Bring me one of those guys, because those Xavier's missed
once is Zach Edey or Donovan Clingan. Nothing big, just a 7'2" lottery pick. Come on, just get him one of those.
We're really going to do this Purdue thing again, aren't we, this year in the tournament? How far you think Purdue's going in the tournament?
Past the first round, but I do not have them in my Final Four. I think they are actually flawed. I don't think it's just like a random thing. I just don't think their guards are dynamic enough, even though they're very good players.
Yeah, I watched that game yesterday against Wisconsin, and I just watched so much Purdue, and it eats at me. But he's so good. All right, let's move on. Let's keep going. Villanova this week. Villanova Wednesday night, 7 o'clock at Cintas. Then Saturday, it is Creighton at noon at Cintas. 2 games at home this week. From the first game against Villanova, we all know what happened. Xavier was 1 point away, and they were about 4 or 5 inches away on a Des Claude shot from a buzzer-beating win at the Pavilion. Instead, it was a 1-point loss. Rick, what do you expect on Wednesday night?
Well, I think back to that game, I just remember Xavier not really playing well, it being kind of a frustrating game for Xavier. And yet at the end of the game, like you said, they had a legit chance to win it. Missed a ton of shots around the rim and in the mid-range, and didn't get like a lot of key defensive rebounds in that game where it led to second chance opportunities. So I felt, and I remember Sean Miller after the game commenting on the fact that he felt defensive rebounding really lost them that game, even though the raw numbers may not have suggested. I think Xavier actually had an edge in offensive rebounding, but the time and situations that they gave up second chance points were really devastating in that game. So I think now, granted, you got to remember Justin Moore didn't play in that first game, so that will make a difference. But he has not been playing very well since he's come back. He missed like 4 or 5 games there. Xavier was one of them. Since he's been back, I mean, he's had a lot of games where he's been scoring in single digits and not giving them a whole lot. So he definitely makes them a different matchup, but he's not setting the world on fire, and I don't think it creates a huge issue for Xavier. So I like how the Musketeers match up. I think this is a good opportunity for them at home.
I agree. I think that this is a very realistic week that they could go 2-0. I think Xavier does beat Villanova on Wednesday night. What do you think about Saturday?
I thought they matched up with, Creighton has like one too many perimeter weapons, it feels like, but I thought they did an okay job of matching up with them in the first half, or in the first matchup between Xavier and Creighton. They weren't completely dominated in that game or anything. So I think they have a chance. The issue with it is Kalkbrenner being so good around the basket, it allows Creighton to really just extend that defense, and they don't give Quincy Oliveri many opportunities to get going from the outside. So Xavier's going to have to find some other source of offense. A little bit easier to do that at home versus on the road in Omaha, but you got to get someone else going than just hoping Quincy can get hot from 3, because Creighton really is able to extend out and take away those perimeter looks with the way they funnel everything into the mid-range.
Yep. All right. So Villanova comes into Wednesday night's game at 12-10 overall, 5-6 in the Big East. They're coming off that win over Providence on Sunday after losing 5 straight games. They had lost 6 of 7 and 5 in a row, but they beat Providence on Sunday, killed Providence on Sunday, and they won 68-50, and it really wasn't even that close. Providence scored 16 points in the first half of that game. I'm still very out on Villanova. I don't have faith in them right now at all, doing really much of anything. I think this would be a tough pill for Xavier to swallow if they can't win this game at home. I know this was a game that Xavier lost last year at Cintas, and it was a frustrating one that Xavier led. They felt like they should have won, and then Villanova came back and got that win. I think it was a one-possession game. That sticks in your mind. And I think that this is a winnable game. As far as Creighton goes, on Saturday, they are 16-6 overall. They have Providence this Wednesday on the road in Rhode Island. They're playing back-to-back road games after 3 straight home games. Creighton right now 16-6 on the season, 7-4 in the Big East, and they are a shoo-in for the NCAA tournament. Just depends on the seed.
Paul, that Villanova loss from last year may be on your mind, may even be on Sean Miller's mind, may even be on Desmond Claude's mind. Not sure anyone else is going to remember much from that when they tip it off.
Yeah, that was disgusting. That was 64-63. Xavier lost that game. It was their last loss of the regular season, February 21st. God, that was gross. That was terrible. Another 1-point loss.
Fortunately or unfortunately, if you wanted them to be using that game as a revenge factor, no one on the team knows about it except Desmond. Yeah. So it ain't going to matter. Paul, let's shill some stuff real quick here again. I mentioned it before, but Musketeer Report, 75% off sale right now. Annual VIP subscription. So if you've been thinking about it, you're like, what is this message board stuff they're talking about? I'm not really into that type of thing. Just try it out because it's not going to cost you anything. It's $224 per month. You're not even going to notice you're spending it. And then lo and behold, a few weeks into this, you're going to be checking your phone 3, 4, 5 times a day to get on the message board and see what people are saying about Xavier hoops. If you're a real Xavier basketball fan, you will love the Musketeer Report message board. And right now is the best deal we offer. You can get it 75% off today only. Paul, Sean Miller podcast. You just had Dalen Terry, former Sean Miller player at Arizona. He's now playing for the Chicago Bulls. He's gone on to great things. So that should be a really good episode, I would assume. I have not listened to it yet.
Yeah, I thought it was great. There were 3 big things that we talked about. One, which I think for Xavier fans that are listening to this that want to know how much a player wants to play for Sean, one of the things Dalen talked about, and this was in the opening segment, was he kept saying, I think it was James Gainey was calling him, the assistant coach at Arizona, and he said, and Gainey was calling me, but Sean wasn't calling me. And I kept waiting for Sean to call me. And seeing how much Dalen wanted to play for Sean, he's from Arizona, and what that meant to actually get that call, commit to him. But then the only year that Dalen played for Sean was the COVID year where there was nobody in the stands. So having to navigate that, what that was like, and what he learned from freshman to sophomore year, then playing for Tommy Lloyd, now his second year in the NBA, some of the lessons that he remembered Sean telling him from his freshman year, and some of those things that you have to learn from your first year to your second year in college, first year, second year in the NBA. Just I learned a lot listening to him, sitting there next to him, talking to him, and getting to hear some of those stories. So if you're a Xavier fan listening to this, and maybe you're not so interested in Arizona, I would highly recommend going and listening. I am very hopeful. I'd say there's a 60% chance that next week's episode is one that nobody listening to this will want to miss. We haven't locked it down yet. We're not 100% sure, but we're hoping that next week's episode is an absolute can't miss. I hope I didn't just I hope it's not a letdown if it's not, but I wouldn't say that if we weren't fairly confident that we're going to be able to get it done. It should be a lot of fun. But yeah, Dalen's this week was great. So appreciate that. Rick, you'll be on the Rebound Rundown tomorrow. We've had a lot of fun with that. I will say I've had a lot of fun with that over the last few weeks. Instead of going off the script, I've kind of been able to just riff a little bit, share some more takes, and just have some fun with that show that I kind of changed the format up with it over the last month or so. So that's been a lot of fun. I appreciate you joining that. And I guess just to close this week, we will podcast again. I would say next Monday is a good target for that because going into next week, Xavier will only play one game next week. That's Seton Hall, and then they have a bye week. They won't play a weekend game on the 17th or 18th. They'll have a bye week until the following week. So we'll follow up next week with a podcast and then maybe take a week and a half off or so before we really get going into that last stretch of conference play. It is hard to imagine that it is already February 5th and the Big East tournament is 5 weeks away. It's just crazy.
It is. All right. So, that's all we got.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Appreciate everybody spending maybe a late lunch hour with us here on the Musketeer Report podcast. Everybody that was listening live, if you're watching it on YouTube or if you're just checking in, you can always go back, subscribe to the podcast channel later.
And hey, by the way, we saw the Twitter comments today. The Twitter comments are coming in. We were able to pop those up and reply to those. So that's great. We can broadcast on all platforms now.
Yeah. One last thing. I see Xavier Muskie. Any recruits on campus this weekend? Do you know? Just want to sneak that in. Is that it?
No.
Okay.
Message board.
Message board. Great plug. All right. For Rick, I'm Paul signing off. Thanks for listening, everybody. Enjoy your day.